It seems to me, and it would also seem to the philosopher Simone Weil, that doing harm to other people is a way for the perpetrator to avoid a certain kind of expenditure of energy, whether it's like emotional or material or whatever, or even existential or kind of karmic. Well, maybe not karmic, but you say you feel angry, and so you say something hurtful to somebody. That act is a kind of lessening of the pain of anger for yourself by inflicting it onto somebody else. So you avoid expending some of the energy necessary to properly deal with that anger, which would entail diving into the anger and actually experiencing it fully and moving through it and experiencing the underlying void, the underlying emptiness of reality, and accepting that and being with it, to be in that emptiness rather than the emotional reaction to it of anger, and then worse, the kind of spreading of that onto other people. And it's the same way with like material relations. You know, someone could be feeling like a scarcity of material wealth, and so they alleviate that for themselves by stealing something from someone else, so that that scarcity just becomes transferred onto the other person. But this kind of thing happens a lot more in various forms of exploitation that are, you know, sometimes unlawful, sometimes very lawful. Economic exploitation, where you have a business and you try to extract as much value from people on every end of every transaction that you can. You try to give the least and take the most. And that comes from a kind of like a kind of feeling of well, you could call it greed, or maybe underlying that there's like a certain insecurity, but underlying all of those things, at the root of all of that is a kind of emptiness that you're trying to avoid by taking from the world. But these particular perceptions, like the perception of scarcity or of danger, or of of the possibility of not having enough to get by or something, very often it's illusory. Very often it's kind of a hallucination that's built up over this general feeling of emptiness. So the task really that is at hand is to stop building up these emotional, conceptual, material structures over the emptiness. Stop avoiding the emptiness and just to look right into it. Look right into it and experience it and accept it and know that it's not really it's not the fearful end to you that you might think it would be. In fact, you can go into it and discover that by abiding in it, you can actually feel the biggest fullness. Even though it's not comfortable, but you go into it and you can experience the dissolution of all of the kind of structures of identity of yourself, all that you identified with, all your emotional attachments. You can feel a dissolution of those that is a very liberating feeling. And it's not like it means like bad things are going to happen to you in your life, like, oh hey dear, doesn't mean like leaving your family or like becoming homeless or something like that. Like you're not really losing anything. But what it can do is give you the strength and the courage and a kind of deeper and more unshakable kind of security. It's not so much a security as like you realize that like you don't have this big self to defend. Like in the innermost sense. You have a sort of unshakable spiritual security that can let you actually act more courageously in the world. And then you can reassess all the little actions that you make. Like every little action, like, is this harming someone or not? Is this harming the world in any small way? Is it benefiting the world in any small way? In a lot of cases, maybe it's doing some of both, but you got to figure out which are the actions that have more benefit than harm. So you have to have a kind of strength of spirit in order to be like, to feel compelled towards this type of action.